I think it's just really important that people make sure they are as up to speed with the technology and where it's going as they can be. People think that they have conquered this or on top of this because they know a few prompts to throw into ChatGPT, and actually you're not even really scratching the surface of what's possible. I think the thing to say, if you're not overwhelmed by the amount of the pace of change and everything out there, you're not looking into it properly, because it blows my head every day.
In a world where AI is evolving faster than most companies can keep up, what does the future of recruitment look like?
There's almost like two visions of the future that I'm using as my kind of working model. One of them I'm calling recruiting Utopia, and the other one is recruiting Dystopia. The dystopian one, all marketing and outreach looks the same. There's no trust. Candidates are just spammed by information.
I'm Mark Whitby, and you're listening to the Resilient Recruiter podcast. My guest today is Matt Alder.
I'm an optimist about this. I think that there is a vision that recruiting can just be brilliant for candidates, employers, recruiters who work in it.
Matt is a talent acquisition futurist, international speaker, author, and host of Recruiting Future, the #1 podcast in our industry.
But I've been running this Recruiting Future podcast now it was 10 years in January, so it's nearly 11 years. I've been saying 10 years all year, so it's nearly 11 years.
Over the last decade, he's interviewed hundreds of TA leaders around the world, giving him a unique vantage point on where recruitment is heading.
We will end up rethinking lots of things about recruitment. Lots of things that we might hold dear will change.
In this episode, Matt and I explore the crossroads that our industry is facing.
I was in a conversation yesterday about the future of CVs and job postings, and when you take a step back from them, they make no sense. That's how we communicate.
Will AI elevate the profession and make room for more human strategic work, or accelerate a downward spiral driven by automation, short-term thinking, and poor candidate experience?
I think one of the things that's really emerged this year that I've been seeing is trust, and how important that is, and actually how little trust there is.
We'll dig into how AI is reshaping workflows right now and what recruiters can do to stay relevant over the next 3 to 5 years. Right. Hi, Matt. Welcome.
Hi, and thank you very much for having me. Always good to be on someone else's podcast.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, and grateful to Rebecca Hastings for introducing us. I was actually with Rebecca all day on Wednesday, and we went out for dinner with some of our clients here in Scotland. She's a phenomenal person, one of my favorite people. How do you know Rebecca?
She actually contacted me a few years ago to try and headhunt me for a job. That was when I first spoke to her. And I spoke to her recently because we had her on the Recruiting Future podcast talking about her AI research.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. That's cool. And what's crazy is that, you have the biggest podcast in the recruiting industry, and I am a fellow podcaster, and we actually only live 11 miles from each other.
I know.
It's
just absolutely insane. It's like really, really, really funny. Obviously, there's this bit of Scotland is the podcasting capital of the world. Then
apparently,
basically, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's because it's nice and quiet, and it's got sea views and stuff like that. But no, it was a really funny coincidence, and it was great to be able to connect with you face to face.
Absolutely, yeah. Loved meeting you in North Berwick recently. So, Matt, your podcast is called Recruiting Future, and you are recognized as the futurist for the recruiting industry. So I would love that to be the main theme of our conversation today, is like the future of recruitment and where are we all headed with the rapid changes in AI and everything else. But just for context, could you give us like the 2 or 3 minute version of your background in recruitment?
Yeah, of course. So I kind of first got involved in the recruitment industry back in about 1998, I think it was. My first job was actually selling classified recruitment advertising for the Guardian, which at the time
brilliant.
Had like huge monopolies in lots of different areas. And during that time, they were launching their kind of first internet website, job well, they weren't even called job boards then. They were just like, let's put the jobs on the internet. So it was interesting to sort of see that develop. And then from there, I kind of kept very much in the recruitment marketing side of things. And I worked for a couple of recruitment marketing agencies, but really doing the digital internet stuff. So sort of, around about the year 2000, looking at how the internet was changing, recruiting, all the job boards launching, ATSs becoming a thing, all of that kind of stuff. So it was great to sort of be able to observe that and sort of take lessons from it and see what happened. And then from there, the last sort of 15 years or so, I've been out as kind of independent. I mainly work with employers on technology strategy and innovation strategy around talent acquisition. But I've been running this Recruiting Future podcast now it was 10 years in January. So it's nearly 11 years. I've been saying 10 years all year. So it's nearly 11 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. And it's just been a really great opportunity to talk to all kinds of people over that time and really sort of track the development of, recruiting and the seeing what's happened and the implications of some of the previous technology leaps that we've had. And that brings us right up to now, which is an absolutely fascinating, if not slightly chaotic time.
Absolutely. Well, for sure. And so it's interesting because I'm sure in the Venn diagrams of our audiences, there is some overlap, but your audience is primarily TA leaders, and my audience is primarily agency recruitment leaders. And but I have some TA listeners, and I'm sure you have some agency listeners as well.
Yeah.
But realistically, we're kind of all in this together when it comes to the future of recruitment, and the same changes are affecting both both internal and external recruiters. So I guess it's such a big topic. I'm not even sure where to start, but I was listening to your podcast recently. It had someone on who was talking about the fact that in some companies, the HR department and the IT department are actually merging.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that a little bit? What's driving that change, and what does that mean for the industry?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's all based around the kind of the AI revolution and how that's gonna play out. And I think there's a couple of things to say about it. I think those examples they're outliers at the moment. So there's a few of them where companies have taken a look and said, actually, we're heading towards what is being called a hybrid workforce, and it's a slightly confusing term because we think of hybrid as going to the office 3 days a week and working remotely. But in this context, it means a workforce that is made up of humans and AI agents AI doing roles that were humans. And so the thinking behind that is actually hugely disruptive for an organization for this to happen. Lots of decisions need to be made about what humans do, what structure looks like, all that sort of stuff. And so it's kind of, there's a real sort of coming together of HR and technology, and some organizations are moving towards actually bringing them together. And there are a couple of, there's one sort of example at least where the chief people officer is actually in charge of all of it. So it's a really interesting kind of insight into what might happen as these things kind of roll out. I think that there's something else that's going on, which is the sort of talent function within organizations. We're kind of seeing the silos in that break down. So a large organization will have a talent acquisition bit to it, a talent management bit to it, a learning and development bit to it. And they're all starting to, those kind of silos are breaking down because of the way that technology is working and employee journeys are working, and that's also a really interesting sort of development in the sort of the traditional way that we sort of view HR and what it does.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're having conversations every week with people, leaders, TA leaders with some of the biggest companies in the world, and I know you regularly go to the biggest conferences. What are you seeing and what are you hearing in terms of, the adoption of AI as it relates to, recruitment, and both like what the reality is right now in terms of, how that's impacting things versus what you think will happen in the future, because there is this gulf between the hype and then the actual um, productivity gains, right? Which
Absolutely.
are not in line with each other. A lot of companies are not sure what to do. They're investing in AI, but they're not getting the ROI necessarily right away. But what's your take on all that?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's what kind of makes this sort of an interesting time. So you kind of have the hype and the future vision, and also the marketing hype around some of the solutions that come on, and they are very much ahead sometimes of the reality, but they're certainly way ahead of the adoption. Um, it's interesting because you're talking about the internet back in the year 2000. It reminds me very much of that time when a lot of the hype about the internet was a long way ahead of where it where they kind of actually met. But what's interesting is the gap is closing much quicker. So back 25 years ago, however long it was, there was an issue. There was a massive issue with connectivity. So, not everyone had a fast internet connection, all of that kind of stuff. Now I'm kind of seeing this gap closing quicker, but it's definitely it's definitely a thing. And I think that cutting through the hype and really understanding what's going on is an important part of this. However, I do think that one of the risks that we face as an industry, hear all the hype, we look at the reality, and you look at it and go, "Yeah, it's just nonsense. It's never going to happen." It absolutely is going to happen. I think that's one of the things that I'm taking from this. So, I would sort of caution people sometimes looking at, the failures and things that haven't quite lived up to where they're going. I'm very certain that it will do. With the productivity gains and all that sort of stuff, it's kind of interesting because there was a kind of a report that MIT put out probably a couple of months ago now about AI pilots failing, not getting the productivity gains that people were expecting, et cetera, et cetera. When you kind of dig into that, it was some very specific. It was very specifically, I think, to do with sales. But also, a lot of the reason that these pilots are failing is because of the humans that they're connected to. Because this is a massive, massive shift. And actually, just plugging AI into little bits and pieces of processes isn't the way that companies are going to get the productivity they need. It's like a lot of it is actually rethinking how those processes work in the first place, and using AI to kind of realize the opportunity there. So we're kind of it's almost that it's not even that the technology doesn't deliver what it says it can. It's like the humans can't quite keep up with how to implement this and what to do with it. And I think that's kind of very much where we are at the moment. But I think we will shift through that and start to see some of the things that are being talked about at the moment. And I think the other thing is, just to add to that, with the productivity hype, I think that a lot of organizations are using AI as an excuse to justify lots of layoffs that they're doing anyway because of the economic climate, as it were. So it's a very kind of confusing picture from that perspective. But I think the journey is clear that we're going on what we're going towards.
Okay, so we'll circle back to what we're going towards in a second. But in terms of like the current situation, then what have you seen as the primary use cases that in reality companies are adopting in their existing workflows and processes? Like, where does AI meet recruitment currently?
Yeah, so I think my answer to this is probably very different for what it would be a few months ago, because I really am seeing some progress. We really have seen some progress this year. I think the issue is it's kind of in patches. It's not kind of distributed equally, and there are lots of great things going on that people don't necessarily talk about. So, what I would say is that, for a long time, we've been talking about, well, AI and automation can really help with scheduling and admin and all this kind of stuff. And I think that obviously continues to be, an important aspect of this, that, automation is a route towards that kind of efficiency. What's been really interesting for me this year has been the candidate interfaces and what they're doing and how they work. So what we've kind of seen over the last few years, particularly in the high volume recruitment space, particularly coming out of the pandemic, lots of kind of restaurants, shops, businesses like that needed to hire people very, very quickly. They really kind of embraced automation probably much quicker than other sectors because it could deliver candidates to them faster, get people kind of in there. So we've sort of seen that. We've seen conversational AI kind of being used in a very sort of limited way, just to connect and do some kind of screening and connect candidates with opportunity. I think what we're seeing now with some of the AI, the AI voice screening and things that are kind of hitting the market now is just fascinating and being used by big employers to recruit real people. It's not, it's not just a theory anymore or an outlier. And I've seen, some big, I was at the Unleashed conference in Paris a couple of weeks ago. Had a demo of some software that sources people. Then it does a full on voice interview with them, where you can ask that AI voice anything about the job, and it will kind of answer you, and then it kind of takes it through. And that was working live with some really, really big businesses. So I think it's that candidate interface is really where I'm seeing the kind of action at the moment, in terms of how AI is being used to really improve the candidate experience by allowing them to get more information, get more feedback, but also to kind of extract the additional information from the candidates that recruiters need, or the company needs, to kind of make those sort of decisions. And it really has been the last 3 months that I've seen that much more. I think that there is a media narrative around it that, AI interviewing is bad and everyone hates it, and employers are just trying to, automate stuff that should be human. I don't think that actually kind of matches some of the reality, because I think that where it's used well like that, candidates actually really appreciate it and like it, providing there is a sense that there is a human still available, somewhere in the process to do that. But that's kind of really been the thing for the last few weeks that I've seen kind of more use cases and examples of.
Okay, that's super interesting. I think you're right. It's controversial in a way, but it's interesting. You said this is actually going to improve the candidate experience, and I think that's right, because the biggest complaint of people when they're applying for jobs, and that's whether it's through an agency or whether it's direct to companies, is it's like you send your CV into the void and then you never hear anything back, right?
Yeah.
That is probably got to be the number one complaint. And it's simply because the employer or the recruiter can't cope with the volume of candidates. Like, you think if you post a job on LinkedIn, you're going to get, dozens, if not a couple hundred responses within 24 hours, right? And it's just it's an overwhelming number. You can't possibly, as a human being, give an adequate, response to all those people. But so there's a sense that, in fact, I had a client of ours, Betsy Robinson, on the podcast a few months ago. Matt, you might be interested in this one. I'll send you the link. She's an IT recruiter in the States, and she's got quite a big staffing agency. And they have actually gone ahead and adopted an AI agent that will screen their candidates. And these are not high volume roles. They're professional technology roles. They're maybe not the most senior level roles, but they're the sort of mid, either individual contributor or mid-level roles within IT. And what her argument was that, which would people prefer? Would they prefer talking to an AI interviewer or not getting an interview at all.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And actually, they're able to respond much faster and get people into the process and give them some kind of feedback, either a sense that they're progressing or at least they're not, and to kind of know where they stand, rather than just, oh, that agency never, I sent them my CV, they never got back to me, right? Let me guess, you're chasing clients who don't value your expertise, working contingency, hoping you'll get paid, and relying on referrals that have started to dry up. What got you here won't get you there. That's why I created a free masterclass that shows you how to break that cycle for good. Inside, you'll see the exact 9-step framework that over 800 recruitment business owners are using to win retained, exclusive work with clients who respect them and who pay full fees. No begging, no burnout, and no spammy LinkedIn messages, just a system that works. Register now at recruitmentcoach.com/clients.
Yeah, it's really interesting because one of the complaints that gets kind of put out there is, I want to talk to a human because I've got this great story, that sits behind my resume, my CV, and I need to tell someone. I need to tell someone why I'm a great fit for this job. And the reality is, especially in the markets that we're in at the moment, no recruiter is going to phone them to for them to tell that story, but actually, with the growing level of sophistication in some of these AI tools, then there's the opportunity for the candidates to tell that story, and for just more information from them, the ability to get more information from them in a structured kind of consistent way than would ever come across in a CV. I think is just a really important thing for both sides of the equation. It's great for recruiters and it's great for the candidate as well, because they can, at least feel heard and seen, and get some feedback. So I think that's really interesting, and I'm not surprised that your clients are looking at that as well, because it just kind of makes it just seems to make it makes a lot of sense when you look at it through this kind of lens, I think.
You mentioned voice interviews. Is that because there's so many different AI interviewing platforms? There's more and more. There must be, I don't know how many there are. There must be 100.
There's probably about 50 launched this morning, I'd imagine.
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy.
And they all have slightly different, obviously, functionalities and benefits. But what are the main categories that you're seeing that have been the most successful?
Yeah, the voice one is really interesting. I think that probably just in terms of the volume and the people recruited, the text based ones, would kind of win that. However, what I think is really interesting with AI, and where I think the best ones are, is they're not limited to a particular mode of communication. So you can choose to interface with them however you want. If you want to have a discussion on WhatsApp, you can have a discussion on WhatsApp. If you want to phone someone and phone an agent and have a voice conversation, they can do that. And I think it's that the opportunity for a candidate to communicate in whatever way they're comfortable with, or even start off with the voice one and then actually I can't talk right now, so we'll carry on with WhatsApp. I think it's that flexibility that's a success, and that's what will make candidates want to use them. So I think it's the ability to operate across all different types of communication channels in a way that's where the candidates are. Because WhatsApp is always good for that, because lots of people use WhatsApp. But yeah, I think it's just that flexibility across all those different, all those different formats, I think is the main thing. I'm not a massive fan of this stuff that's kind of a novelty. So we've invented a video recruiter, and we've spent all this time to make this person look like this and be human and have a characteristic. I think it's got to think about the what we're actually trying to achieve from this. And people don't really like talking to fake people. I think it needs to be very upfront that this is this is an AI. We'll give it, we'll make it nice to talk to. So we'll give it some element of personality, but we're not trying to create a whole, we're not trying to replace that sort of human recruiter. Where this is something that is adding, value to the process.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask you about video, AI recruiters, and yeah, I do think that like the AI voice is so good
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
even though it's not a real person, it does feel comfortable. Like I talk to ChatGPT all the time. I do the voice mode and just talk to it rather than type sometimes because I just want to have a conversation and think through a problem or what have
Yeah.
you. Um, and it's an AI and you accept it's an AI but you're okay. But it communicating in that modality is comfortable for some people. But I feel like the video is almost a step too far because then we're like, why are we doing that? We're pretending that we're talking to a person, even though we all know that that is not a person. I don't know. Do you think that
Mm.
will ever be a thing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on what people are comfortable with, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah,
I'm not really comfortable with talking to fake people on video, but there's probably a generation coming up who would actually
maybe.
like that,
Yeah.
or they'd send their own fake video to talk to the video, or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it'll evolve. I think people need to focus really on what this is for and what it's doing, rather than just kind of obsessing on it's this channel and this, and we've created our own video. Do you know what I mean? I think it's just really important to sort of focus on the the value that it's bringing to people. But I'm sure it will I'm sure it will shift as we move forward and we become more comfortable with these kind of things. And I think ultimately, particularly from a candidate perspective, we all interact with AI bots and things like that in everything else that we do in the consumer world. And where they work really well and give us value, we absolutely love them and sometimes prefer talking to them than a human. But I think also there are so many bad ones that you have a terrible experience and you end up having to talk to a human, but you've wasted half an hour, having a conversation that hasn't even been saved to anything. And I think that's what creates some of the friction. And I think if these things are really good, save people time, add value, then people will embrace them.
Okay, makes total sense. So it sounds like that's a major use case that you're seeing a lot of adoption with is the actual candidate interface. What would be a couple of others?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think there is the whole marketing side of things. There's the job postings and using LLMs to generate job postings and all that kind of stuff. We're seeing a lot of content being generated by recruitment content being generated by by AI. And this is probably the area that most people have jumped into because it seems like an easy thing to do. It throws up some huge issues for me, I think, because when everyone is doing their marketing, they all have the same tools. They're all going to sound the same. How do people stand out? And some of the if you're not using the right tool or you're not very good at using the tool, some of the output that comes out of it is just sounds terrible. I think with job postings in particular, there is a lot of sort of work going on around the intrinsic bias that some of the LLMs have in terms of how they produce the language of those. So it's kind of an evolving area, but I think that's obviously one that that lots of people have jumped into, and there's some really good things that have come of that as well. I think that even employers being able to sort of standardize job descriptions or just have, they're sometimes going from such a low base in terms of quality, even with these kind of issues, it kind of raises things up a bit. So yeah, that's definitely another one, that whole marketing side, definitely.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think the reality is a lot of companies weren't good at the marketing communications anyway. Hence the need why, like you worked in recruitment marketing yourself,
Yeah,
and left to their own devices, companies are not necessarily going to produce excellent job postings or really marketing materials around jobs anyway. So, but I think what AI, if you add AI to that, you just get a lot of sameness.
You do, but
and
it's like
also
a
the volume.
slightly higher quality of sameness and
Yeah,
volume.
probably exactly. Like I
Yeah.
always tell people, like the AI. Can the AI write as well as a world-class copywriter? No, definitely not. Can it write better than the average person? Yes, it can, right? So I think there's levels to that. What we encourage our clients to do is, first of all, you should have the written detailed persona or ICP of the person that you're trying to communicate with. What are their aspirations? What are their goals, etc. And you should have your own style guide. So there's the brand guide as far as the company, but then the style guide of the individual person themselves. How do they talk? How do they write? And all of those have to go into the production of whatever content you're trying to produce. Otherwise, it is not going to stand out. It's just going to be AI slop that is
I think that's
crowding the market.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, and it's like it's easy to raise yourself up a little bit by doing that. I think that's it's just kind of really, really important. And some of the tools are really good at that. So Claude is very good at writing, as opposed to it's better than ChatGPT at doing it. And it's just I think the thing is it's not quite the shortcut that it seems. You have to kind of really invest time and attention and kind of really learn how it works, but then it can be. And I think also we kind of other kind of uses we're seeing, the operational efficiency that the AI can bring, the ability to look at data from lots of different areas, and also like note-taking, interviewing, and finding meaning and stuff. I mean, I think there's all kinds of different things that are going on at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the note-taking and being able to capture all that data that in a normal, before AI, all of that would have been lost, right? Because if you think of the average recruiter, whether they're internal or external, interviewing a candidate, and they're going to make some notes, and they may or may not upload those to the ATS, but guaranteed, whatever they put on the ATS is going to be a fraction of the content of that conversation, right? Whereas now, with AI, you can capture the entirety of that conversation, parse that data, and then be able to make use of it in some way. So that actually is one of those areas where it's additive. It's not going to take anything away from what humans can do. It's only going to enhance what
exactly, yeah. And also, if you think about, we've got all these transcriptions that are kind of out there, the ability to then interrogate that in a structured way. So for example, I all my podcast transcripts add up to 4 million words.
Wow.
And, I've set up an AI which will go and search it for me and tell me stuff about things that happened and things that people said. And it's like, even like 18 months ago, that would just be inconceivable that something something that's literally on my sort of, desktop, laptop could do that. And I think that the ability to deal with all that data and information is something that, we really need to try to think about what the implications of that are as well.
Well, that's true. But it is kind of it is almost like remembers things better than I do. So I can say, what did I talk about with Matt Alder last time? And give me a summary, like in between, if it's been 2 months since we last spoken and I want to pick up the thread of where we left off, I can say, give me a quick summary of the key things that Matt and I discussed when we met last time. And, that right in a few seconds, I'm up to speed again. So here's one area which I'm interested in, Matt, which I think isn't yet where, to me, it's not really functional, usable, but where there's a lot of hype, and that is the outreach. So we've talked about postings, and we've talked about responding to job seekers and then being able to screen them and interview them and so on. But a lot of, certainly, our clients are proactively headhunting people and reaching out to people who are not necessarily on the market or responding to job ads. And there are platforms where they purport to be an all-in-one, like, first of all, they'll find people, in natural language, tell them what you're looking for, and they will build a list of the candidates for you. They'll find their contact information, and then they will even write the outreach, and they'll send them an email sequence, right? And what I've observed is that at the first two things are actually good, like sourcing, building lists of candidates, because they've tapped into just like millions and millions of profiles, and then finding contact information, great. That's definitely time saving. But then launching sequences, and the promise is like they could write a custom email to every single individual based on what they've been able to find out about that person. And so each email is unique and it's completely personalized. But when I read those emails, they're rubbish. They do not
I agree.
Without guardrails and templates and things where from someone who actually knows how to write good copy, to me, it's not living up to the hype yet. But do you think that we will get to a point where bots will be able to write very good outreach that you can just press a button and it will do the search for you. It will contact all those people and then it will interview them for you. And then I only need to have the interviews with the top, candidates before moving them forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it probably will. I think the problem at the moment is that very good at identifying people, building these kind of communication sort of structures, but people are just overwhelmed with, recruitment's doing it. Every other industry's doing it as well. So people are just getting all these, allegedly personalized emails, and it's just they're not very good. And if you're trying to get someone's attention and they're not actively looking, I think people are actually looking for jobs, that's different, but people are not actively looking for jobs. It's just, it hasn't really synthesized that art form of getting their attention. And I think it's because firstly, it's kind of there's some very human aspects to it, empathy, emotion, everything that's kind of involved. But also, from a recruiting perspective, there still isn't a huge amount of information that these systems can go off. You've got LinkedIn profiles and CVs, and there isn't sort of this trove of information that tells you about people and what their triggers are and all that sort of stuff. So it doesn't surprise me that they produce nonsense. And I think that people really need to look really carefully at where the tools add value and where they don't. I've said for a long time, when marketing automation came into recruiting for the first time, my concern was like, well, it's great that you've got these tools, you can do all these automated sequences, but if the copy's rubbish, it's just like it's accelerating spamming. Dear first name, I'm looking for, it's just horrible. And I think this is just a version of that. And I think that that's where humans are still really required in order to kind of stand out. And also I think more generally, because there's so much, every post I've read on LinkedIn today has been written by AI, and it's had an AI thing just because of the way they're structured, you can tell. And I think people just get absolutely blind to them. And I think anything that stands out, anything that's obviously human, is going to sort of shine above all of the, all the slop and everything else. So I think, it's it doesn't surprise me that they don't work properly, because at the end of the day, this is still a business about humans. It's persuading humans to do something, to make really big decisions, and there are bits in that you just cannot automate. And then the bits in that just don't follow logic either. You kind of you got the whole emotional kind of and everything else in it. So yeah, but they will get better and better and better. I think that's a thing to say.
Well, exactly. And so I guess that's a good segue then to talk about the future. And so what are your predictions as far as where this is all leading? And you mentioned the time frame. So it's similar to the kind of, internet age, except happening way faster. So the time frames are, instead of like 20 years, it's like 2 years kind of thing. Based on all the conversations that you're immersed in, Matt, what are the top 2 or 3 big things that you think are coming?
Yeah, that's a great question. If I really knew, it would be brilliant. But so I think that we're kind of on a journey with this. So we're in the sort of the automation, the efficiency. Let's plug AI into various different bits of our existing processes. We're sort of very much in that mode at the moment. I do think that there is a revolution coming, and I think that we will end up rethinking lots of things about recruitment and lots of things that we might hold dear will change. I was in a conversation yesterday about the future of CVs and job postings, and when you take a step back from them, they make no sense. That's how we communicate. So I think that we will move towards a very different looking model. I think ultimately, the big question is always like, well, what's the role of the recruiter? Will there still be humans involved in this? And I go back to what I said a bit earlier about, what recruitment is and all the different factors that are involved in it. And I think that there will be humans, 100% involved in it, advocating for clients, advocating for candidates, making decisions, influencing people. I think that's a big thing. But I think the recruiter part is about influence and relationship building, and then everything else is kind of going towards the, is going the way of technology. And I think that people need to think really carefully about, what are the skills that I have as a recruiter, I develop as a recruiter, that will still be important. And I think some of the skills that people think could never be, never go the way of the machine will.
For example,
yeah, I'm kind of not, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd love to double click on that. Like what?
Sure.
Thinking about future proofing your career as a recruiter, what are the skills that are, uniquely human and that really are still going to be relevant in a year or 2 years' time?
Yeah, it's definitely relationship building. I think also just networks and contacts, and be able to connect with people and find people who other people can't connect with and find with. I think that's really important. And then that kind of whole persuasion part to it from an in-house employer perspective. I can see there are some really sort of big strategic plays here in terms of more strategic thinking about talent and that kind of stuff. So I think it's really on that kind of relationship side and that strategy side that people kind of really need to think about and focus. I think anything that is based around things like I've got X amount of years of experience and I've just got a gut feel about this, I think is not a future-proof strategy, because ultimately a machine can benchmark a CV against a million other CVs in a very short period of time, whereas your brain is benchmarking against your experience, which you might not be remembering properly and will never be able to have as much data as a machine can have. If that kind of makes any sense.
Definitely.
So, yeah. So I think it's those kind of things. I mean, I think that it was interesting. Yesterday, I was at TA Tech Europe, which is the kind of the job board industry conference, and I was doing a live podcast interview actually on stage with Jeff Taylor, the guy who founded Monster.
Oh, wow, cool.
It's kind of really interesting. He's been out in the industry for 20 years. He's come back. We're looking at parallels between what was going on, in 94, 95 when he started Monster, what's going on now. But yeah, he was going very big on, this is the end of job postings, this is the end of resumes. He's building something that really looks at people much more holistically in terms of their skills and what they do, and it kind of does that in a way that is kind of presentable for recruitment. So I think we'll see a lot more of this. Actually, how are we assessing whether someone's good for a job? Does experience matter anymore? Does skills matter anymore? What becomes important about why we hire someone? And I think in parallel to that, we will have, and who knows how this is going to pan out in terms of, AI reducing the amount of jobs or changing jobs. I think that's going to, we can't look at this just in isolation of this is what's going to happen to recruitment, because jobs are changing as well. And, that will have a kind of a big impact. But I'm an optimist about this. And I think that there is a vision that recruiting can just be brilliant for candidates, employers, recruiters who work in it, I think that we can get to a point where people are able to hire the right person at the right time, at the right time for them, the right time with the company. And I think that this could fix a lot of the issues that we've had for decades, if not hundreds of years. So I'm being an optimist about it, but there is a lot of disruption to go through to get there.
Definitely. Okay, so this is brilliant, Matt. Let me just recap on a couple of things you said. So first of all, you highlighted 3 things that human recruiters bring to the table, which are going to become, will still be important and may become even more important. So one is the idea of your network, your connections, which is funny because, well, in fact, let me enumerate them first, and then we'll talk about each one. So network, relationship, and influence.
Yeah.
So with the network, it's almost like because everybody has access to the data now, that's no longer just having the knowledge of who.
Yeah, it's not knowledge of who, it's having the relationships with
right,
who.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
That's the key thing. Yeah.
Because earlier we talked about the fact that there's so much email and LinkedIn messages that the response rates are going down. So what often makes the difference is the referral, right? The network of saying, oh, hey, Matt, this is what I'm looking for. Who do you know that you've worked with in the past that would be great for this opportunity? And then when I call that person, I can say, your name was given to me by Matt Alder. That person is much more likely to respond, right? And so it's the network plus the relationships that give you a much better chance of actually, getting that person to engage to the benefit of my client and getting them into that process. The other thing you said, the third thing was influence. And now it's really interesting because I often use ChatGPT to help me work out, for example, what's the best way to deal with this objection or what have you. So it's very good at putting together arguments that are persuasive, but what you don't have is trust, right? And so I feel like a human-to-human conversation where you have genuine empathy and where you've established trust, those will lead to having more influence rather than if I'm talking to an AI agent and it's trying to sell me the job, do I believe that this agent really has any feeling for me and has my best interest at heart? No, because it doesn't have a heart. It literally is a machine, right? And it knows the right, pain points to press, and it knows the right things to say to sound like it's emotionally intelligent. But the reality is, I don't trust it. I don't believe that it has any real, genuine, sincere interest in me progressing my career.
Yeah, and I'd say on that, I think one of the things that's really emerged this year that I've been seeing is trust and how important that is, and actually how little trust there is, in every bit of kind of recruitment, every bit of everything at the moment. And I think that it just becomes more and more important as we move forward as like this really kind of important currency, particularly when everything becomes more automated and machine driven, and also where machines can imitate humans really, really well. So it's I think trust is probably the most important thing to be thinking about moving forward, and I've really sort of come to that conclusion in the last sort of couple of months.
So thinking about that, then how do we ensure that we are the trusted voice in whatever kind of ecosystem we recruit for? I feel like part of the answer is what you're doing brilliantly, which is, being a thought leader and a creator in that space. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because I think one of the real things that recruiters have going for them, whether that's internal or external, is just their knowledge of the market, that they're out there having conversations all the time. From an internal recruiter's perspective, they're having conversations with their competitors all the time. And just there is so much kind of market intelligence that kind of floats around and probably isn't properly captured. And I think that is a kind of a huge thing that all recruiters have that people really need to really need to think about. And I think also, just reflecting on what you were saying there, I think it's funny because it's almost like if you went back to the pre-internet days and what recruiters did when they didn't have access to all the world's information and email sequences and all this sort of stuff. It was these things. It was building relationships and referrals and being the experts and all that sort of stuff. And I think that is probably the core of it. It's almost a return to the way that the world was for some people before the internet came along. And I think it's I think that sort of that kind of the industry knowledge, that ability to judge where the market's going, looking at all the kind of early warnings. I think that's so important. And I think one of the other things I had a really interesting conversation with someone yesterday who just moved jobs, really kind of senior executive, moved from one company to another, and they were saying that the headhunter boned them at just exactly the right time. They were, they'd not taken a call from a recruiter for 4 years. But literally, it was like that day, that hour was just the perfect time. They took the call. They moved jobs, and it's almost like maybe the magic of AI is kind of trying to find those moments and find that information to make it easier for people to build that trust and really kind of help people. It just sort of struck me that there's could be a great combination between humans and technology there.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm sure there must be the potential, at least, to develop an algorithm that can predict based on someone's career history and how long they've been in a role, and maybe combined with industry news about that company. Or I'm sure there's a number of signals.
Yeah,
that
I've seen attempts at that before in lots of different ways. But it just does strike me that there, that is somewhere where an AI could give a huge kind of, a huge sort of advantage. And I think, LinkedIn had something like that as well, some signals thing. And they've never really kind of stuck in the past because they probably weren't very good. But I think that the ability now to analyze so much data is the thing that really shifts this. And I think that some of the things that are being talked about, in terms of, job boards molding into these kind of mass market skills things, they're driven because AI can look at so much data. And I think that's the so I don't think that actually a lot of the ideas that will change recruitment will be new ideas. They're just ideas that are made possible because of what the technology can do.
Okay, makes sense. And I guess something that occurred to me as you were talking there is that if everyone has the same technology, it sort of cancels it out as a competitive advantage, right? And then what you're left with is those fundamental things that made people successful in the first place: the networks, the relationships, the industry deep, expertise. So I'd like to hear about optimism versus disruption. And so you said you're optimistic. Let's finish on that note, actually.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I've got sort of two visions of potential future, but then I've also got something else that I just want to throw in about where we might end up. So to kind of finish that answer about what's the future recruitment look like. But before I get to that bit, so I sort of built, there's almost like two visions of the future that I'm using as my kind of working model for this. And one of them I'm calling recruiting Utopia, and the other one is recruiting Dystopia, just to be really kind of black and white and simple about it. And I think the dystopian one is somewhere where we could end up. So it's that, all marketing and outreach looks the same. There's no trust. Candidates are just spammed by information. Recruiting becomes just a total transactional thing that's managed by humans. And companies that will devalue it. And it's just kind of seen as an automated process. It's full of bias and all these kind of things. And I can see that we could end up there. I don't think we'd stay there forever because I think its true value will be realized.
But Matt, you said recruitment becomes a process managed by humans. Did you mean...
Sorry, but managed by machines. Yeah, I meant
by machines. Right.
Machines,
Got it.
Yeah, so completely managed by machines, not important, very transactional, full of bias. Also, pigeonholes candidates into exactly what they've done in the past, all that sort of stuff. So I think that we could get there. But then, as I said, the optimistic view is that actually right opportunity at the right time for the candidates, right skills at the right time for the company, brilliant process, transparent, everyone gets feedback, and the humans focus on doing the bits that they're best at. That to me is the sort of the optimistic view of it. I suppose as a kind of curveball on this, in terms of where do I think recruitment might end up, this is something I'm sort of working on at the moment. So if you kind of look at agentic AI, so these AI assistants that are autonomous and can make decisions and actually build other assistants to create stuff. And if you look at what's happening in the market at the moment, so candidates using AI to mass apply, to do all this kind of stuff. If you sort of iterate all those out in terms of technology development and, candidate behavior, and this is something that other industries are plotting for in terms of what might happen, you get a point where the candidate just has a careers agent and the career agent goes out and just runs their career. It knows what they want. It finds opportunities. It does all that stuff. And then on the other side, employers or recruiters, whoever it is, they have an agent, and the agents just do stuff together, and it spits out a match and humans at the other end. And that is entirely feasible that might happen. And then there are sort of huge implications for, well, actually, how do employers stand out? How does that layer of influence work? And they're the kind of conversations that are going on in marketing at the moment about how people buy things. And I just think we should keep an eye on that, because it could be quite a strong prediction in terms of recruitment. But there's probably a whole nother hour of pulling that apart.
No, that's when you think about it, absolutely. Like, companies are developing recruiting agents or teams of agents to do various things. I guess if there was a candidate side of that, then you have agents talking to other AI agents, which kind of sounds crazy, but I can see how that could be a natural.
And I think my advice to people around that is keep an eye on that, on the software that's serving the candidate market. Because I think at the moment we tend to look at it as like grifting, spamming. People want to get rich quick, so they're giving clients these easy apply things. And I don't think we're actually taking it very seriously as an injury. As an industry, I think we just see it as an annoyance. But actually, that could be where lots of innovation comes from in terms of how candidates behave. So I think keeping an eye on that side of the industry would be a valuable thing for everyone to do.
Definitely. Well, in fact, it was Rebecca who told me that she's seeing more and more. She's getting on Zoom calls or Teams calls with candidates, and she can tell immediately that they are using AI in real time to answer her questions.
Yeah, or they're just fake.
The whole interview is like not legit. It's like
I know, and I think in the end, getting to this conversation, actually, well, is the way that we recruit actually the best way to recruit? If it could just be sort of automated and faked like that. So so much kind of going on, so much disruption and big decisions coming down the pipe, definitely.
What two final questions, Matt. So in terms of disruption, like, what are we in for? And because if we're aiming for recruitment utopia, and that's where we think we'll eventually end up, but it's not going to be like an easy ride to get there. What are the things to watch out for?
Yeah, I think watching that candidate software side, I think is a kind of a really important aspect to it. I think it's just really important that people make sure they are as up to speed with the technology and where it's going as they can be. And I think one of the things that I see a lot of is people think that they have conquered this or on top of this because they know a few prompts to throw into ChatGPT, and actually you're not even really scratching the surface of what's possible. I think the thing to say, if you're not overwhelmed by the pace of change and everything out there, you're not looking into it properly, because it blows my head every day. So I think that's kind of important. And I think because we are in this sort of politically and economically disruptive time as well as everything that's going with technology, sometimes that means things can move faster because companies will look at actually, we need to save money. We need to do recruitment in a different way. Can we, truly embrace some of these new ways of working? So I think that actually might fuel quite a lot of the change. And also from a recruitment agency perspective, they will want to, be profitable and be successful as businesses. So I think they'll look very differently at. I think that the economic environment might actually speed up some of the innovation because people will do it through necessity. So I think that's certainly something to watch.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I suppose, a lot of your guests on your podcast work at massive companies, and a lot of the clients of the businesses that we serve are often dealing with smaller, like growth companies, let's say.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's an opportunity for recruiters to be further ahead on this AI journey than their clients are, and therefore to be able to sell solutions that bridge that gap for employers. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think that everyone is trying to make sense of this. I think small, medium-sized businesses have just got so much going on that they would kind of welcome that sort of input. And even the large companies, they can't move quickly. They have their own issues. So I think there is I think this is the big thing for me right now. This is a huge opportunity that people should be embracing, but that window is not going to be open for very long. So I think that the people who kind of dive in and really, embrace this, offer their clients those kind of advice, that kind of services, really think about this differently, let go of some of the long-held beliefs that they've had that things are changing. It's a huge, huge opportunity, but it's a window that won't be open for, it won't be open indefinitely.
When you say indefinitely, like what do you see as the time scale here before we either reach utopia or dystopia?
I don't know. It's so difficult. It's so difficult to say. Obviously, things are moving quickly, but we haven't really talked about this. There are other things that hold this back as well. So we've got regulation, we've got governments doing crazy things. There are lots of things that might slow this down.
Even electricity,
capacity. The entire growth of the world economy being predicated on 6 companies, AI companies doing business with each other. I mean, there's a lot of things that might, that might kind of slow this up. So I think all I can say is quicker than it was with the internet, because it could be, but again, we're talking about humans, and we only move at a certain speed. The technology is moving quicker than humans can keep up with. But yeah, quicker than the internet. I think that we've seen some interesting things this year. I think we'll see some real changes next year. Maybe this is kind of a 3 to 5 year horizon. And then if you ask me in January, I might change my mind and say it's 6 months. So
right,
it's difficult to say. But it's certainly not 10 years. It's within the planning cycles of or the thinking cycles of everyone working now.
Yeah, absolutely. You've probably seen this graph of like the plotting the entirety of human like progress in terms of adoption of technology as a exponential curve. And like, so how long did it take to get fire? How long did it take to get the wheel? How long did it take? And then like the pace of that change being compressed so that, what happened in 100 years now happens in 10 years. And then what happens in 10 years and then happens in 1 year. And we're at potentially the point, that inflection point where it just goes almost vertical, and like you compress 5 years of change into months. But
yeah, and I think my favorite quote, which I think I first heard about 5, maybe even 10 years ago, was today is the slowest pace of change that we'll ever see, and that's been true ever since I've heard that quote, whether it's 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think that's what people need to think about. This is things are moving very, very quickly, and it needs some real kind of flexible thinking. I think that's the key message.
Fantastic. Matt, thank you. This was fun. Like an hour's just flown past, and we could do another hour, I'm sure, easily. But that was super valuable. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
All right. I'll see you soon. Take care. Okay, super interesting. A couple of things that really stood out to me from this conversation. Number one is how fast things are moving. Matt explained how AI is changing how sourcing, screening, and communication happen inside large TA teams. This isn't something coming in the future. It is already happening, including parts of the job that recruiters believed AI could never do, like candidate interviews, are already being done by AI. Matt gave examples of large employers using AI to conduct live voice interviews with candidates, asking and answering questions in real time. But the other thing that stood out to me in this conversation is Matt's optimism. He said he can absolutely see a more utopian future where recruiting becomes brilliant for candidates, employers, and recruiters who work in it. So what Matt made clear is that AI isn't the threat that many people fear. As more manual work gets automated, recruiters have a chance to lean further into the parts of the job that actually matter: insight, influence, and relationship building. He explained that the most successful organizations aren't necessarily replacing recruiters with technology. They're redesigning workflows so that humans and AI work together, with people still guiding decisions, shaping outcomes, and advocating for clients and candidates. Now, let's be real. If recruiters rely on traditional, transactional skills, they will be left behind. The future recruiter needs to be commercially aware, tech-enabled, and exceptional at building trust. But if they can do that, the next few years represent a huge opportunity for recruiters. So stay curious, stay adaptable, and I'll see you in the next episode.